Hello stars, a pleasant afternoon to all of you. Kumusta po tayong lahat? And before we finally start this webinar session, here are just few reminders for everyone. So our participants here in Zoom, please rename to your complete name so we can address you properly later and stay muted while the discussion is ongoing. There will be a question and answer session after the discussion. So later you may put your questions in the chat box here in the Zoom and in the comment section for our participants in the Facebook Live. For certificate concerns, we assure you that you will be receiving your certificate or certificate of attendance or completion as long as you comply with the requirements that we give. Due to the big number of participants who joined in our webinars, we ask for a little bit more of your patience as you wait for those certificates. And lastly, we encourage everyone or to participate actively and give your full attention as you attend this webinar. So again po, questions regarding what were mentioned will no longer be entertained during the question and answer later. So we will start in 2 minutes. In the meantime, select a place that feels most comfortable to you. Thank you. Okay, once more, I'd like to wish everyone a pleasant afternoon and welcome to the third episode of the Content Enrichment webinar series in Physics. This webinar is brought to you by the Science Education Institute, Department of Science and Technology's project Science Teacher Academy for the Regions, or STAR. I am LJ Pasqua, your host for this online session. So we sincerely appreciate truly our participants attending and accepting our invitation. Today is another opportunity to pick up new ideas and correct any misconceptions you may have about the physical laws that govern the universe. So take a seat back and take all in the knowledge that our speaker will be providing you in a moment. For that, it is a great honor to introduce to you our resource person for today. Our resource person is a member of the Faculty of the Physics Department of the College of Science of Bicol University in Legazpi City, Albay. She is teaching general physics courses as well as discipline-based physics for computer science, biology students, and food technology students. She has been with DOST SEI Project Star since 2014 as Star Trainer and also involved in our as a technical working member in our projects. She is a member of the regional trainer pool of the Department of Region 5, Department of Education Region 5 for Physics and General Science. Without further ado, gentlemen and ladies, to discuss projectile motion for this afternoon, help me welcome Professor Joan Cordovilla of Bicol University. Ma'am Jo.
Thank you, LJ. Thank you very much for the introduction. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope that everybody has already eaten their lunch and is ready for an afternoon of physics. So I am hoping that by giving this particular lecture, you will be able to learn something new. Let's hope that there is something new that I can still provide you. And also at the same time, let's also check whether what we know that lines up with everything else. Okay, so let's begin. So LJ, I already have share screen privileges, no?
Yes, Ma'am Jo.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so to start with, let's do a small check. Is my microphone audible to everyone?
Loud and clear po.
Okay, thank you very much. And my screen share is also working fine?
Yes po.
Okay, thank you very much, LJ. Okay, so let's begin. So the topic that was given to me is to discuss is projectile motion. So as you can see from the previous lectures that were provided for you sa physics, the discussion was more on electricity and magnetism as well as light. So this time we go back to an earlier chapter, which is the chapter on two-dimensional motion. And this time we will specifically discuss projectile motion. Okay, so by the way, the choice of the topic projectile motion is based on a survey conducted by LJ and the rest of the group in SEI regarding what topics teachers would like to hear about. Okay. So these are my references that I've used for preparing this particular webinar. Of course, wala sa atin na hindi makakawala kay conceptual physics because conceptual physics is still the best non-math treatment of physics that we have in terms of textbooks. And then we also have, of course, the gold standard ng ating physics textbooks, which is University Physics by Young and Friedman. And I also use Catnell, we call it Catnell Physics, which is essentially written by Catnell and Johnson. And then I will also be using Physlets for simulations, for some of the simulations that we will be doing in this session, as well as various internet sources that are included in the slides. So I understand from LJ that the participants will be provided with a copy of this presentation later on. Tama po, LJ?
Yes, Ma'am Jo.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so there is no need for you to screenshot everything. We are going to be providing you with a copy of the presentation. And then of course, I am also using a particular kind of application that is intended for classroom use, which is called Open Board. I am hoping that you will like this particular application, especially kung meron pa rin kayong online class that is being conducted. Okay, so as teachers, of course, ang ano natin is we want everybody to participate actively in the discussion. But in order to keep the webinar running smoothly, what we will do is we are going to take advantage of the fact na meron po tayong chat dito. You can actually put your questions on the chat. You can also write your answers on the chat so that we can have an engaging afternoon. So hindi po na I prefer that you would please participate actively in our discussion today so that we can have a more meaningful interaction in this particular webinar. So please answer questions. If I ask questions, you can answer them through the Zoom and FB Live chat boxes. I have a small monitor for FB Live along my left, and I am also keeping track of the questions that we have here in our Zoom. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so this is the outline of my presentation this afternoon. We will begin by looking first back into velocity and acceleration and looking at how we can actually make understanding of velocity and acceleration better beyond the equations that we are given. And then we will also, of course, discuss a little bit about free fall. And then essentially our discussion of projectile motion actually begins from the third line. So eto po. So projectile motion is essentially here, how to fall forward. Okay, so let's change the tip of my pen. Okay, so this is projectile motion already by this time. And then because it cannot be avoided, and also because the beauty of physics is best expressed in math, so we will have some beautiful mathematics at the end of our session, where I hope that some of the parts that we are going to be discussing is something that would make you appreciate how math and physics can actually go together very, very well. Okay po, so I hope na handa na po ang lahat. Titingnan ko lang po muna yung chat box natin kung meron tayong question dito. Sir Alfred is asking, ox lang po ba if na-miss yung previous two sessions? Yes, sir. Each session for the webinar is actually a standalone session, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, let's begin. So we will begin with a short story about Timmy and Tim who go to the same school. So I understand that yung mga taga-DepEd po ay nagsipasukan na po kayo, and some of you are already full face-to-face, while others are gradually easing into it. And so this one is an example where you have two students going to the same school. So Timmy lives further away from school, while Tim lives near. Okay. Every afternoon, they would walk home together. Okay. So they will normally have a conversation, but we take note of a certain conversation they have one afternoon while they were walking home to school. So Timmy says, "It takes me 30 minutes to walk from my house to school. How about you?" And Tim answers, "Oh, I walk around 10 minutes to get to school." Timmy says, "I walk longer because my house is far from our school than your house." And Tim answered, "I don't know. Could be that I just walk faster than you." Okay, so the question that we are asking here is, how do we prove whether it's Timmy or it's Tim who is supposed to be right? So Timmy has the assertion that Timmy walks a longer amount of time because the house that Timmy goes home to is actually farther from school. On the other hand, Tim says that maybe I just walk faster. So now we have a certain kind of situation here where an argument can actually go on, di ba? So pwedeng magkaroon ng argument. So let's have a short practice regarding answering on the chat. So sa tingin niya, sino po ang tama ang kanyang assertion? Si Timmy or si Tim? Sabi ni Timmy, mas mahaba nilalakad ko kasi mas malayo bahay ko. Sabi ni Tim, baka naman kasi mas mabilis lang ako maglakad kaysa sa'yo. So sa tingin niyo, sino sa kanilang dalawa ang tama? Okay? Ayun, so sabi ni Sir Alfred, lack of data given, but both of them can be right. Okay, so ano kaya sir sa tingin nyo ang data na dapat meron tayo for them to be able to make a decision? Kung sino ang tama sa kanilang dalawa. Ano kaya kulang? Ayun, so Ma'am Jinky says rate or speed, and then Sir Alfred answers the distance or the speed of each person, and then Sir J, Ma'am Rosario, and Sir Al, and then si Ma'am Charlene answered speed of walking. Okay, so essentially, everybody mentions a little bit something about speed as well as distance na inaano ng dalawa. Okay, so how are we going to resolve this particular situation of the two? So let us look at how we can resolve it simply by looking at, sorry po. Ninervyos pa ako so medyo nanginginig yung aking kamay habang nagpe-press ng buttons. Okay, so now let's look at what's going to happen with these two. Okay, so first, ang alam lang natin is that supposedly, si Timmy lives further away. And we know that Tim lives nearer. So that what we only know is that if we try to compare the distance of Timmy, which we will call D1, so papangalan natin si Timmy as 1, and we will name Tim as 2, we know that Timmy lives further away, so that ang D1 is actually larger than T2. But what we really don't know is actually yung, what we definitely know actually is that Timmy requires 30 minutes. So ang time 1 ni Timmy is 30 minutes. And ang time 2, which is for Tim, is actually 10 minutes. Okay, so ito po yung alam natin based doon sa pag-uusap nilang dalawa. So because that is all that we know regarding their conversation, regarding what they have about each other, this data is essentially incomplete to form a conclusion. But all of you already know that we are supposed to look at speed. Okay, so papasok na ngayon yung idea ng speed. And speed, according to definition, is supposed to be distance over time. And we level this up a little bit by making this about velocity. And in this case, ang velocity, ang nilalagay na natin dito is that this one is supposed to be displacement over time. Kasi ang alam natin, if there is a specific direction, then we know that supposedly your speed can be converted into velocity provided that you know already the direction of the motion. Okay? However, what is important is that we look actually at the relationship of the different variables that we have here for us to be able to conclusively answer whether it's Timmy or Tim who is right. Ano ba yung mga variables na dapat nating tingnan? Kung magpo-focus muna tayo dito sa speed, distance, and time, notice that we actually have 3 variables. We have speed, we have distance, and we have time. And what we know is that it's the relationship between these 3 variables that will actually determine whether or not Timmy or Tim is going to be right. So, one of the things that we always say is something is faster than the other. Yun nga yung yun yung sinasabi nga ni Tim, di ba? Na siya daw ay mas mabilis siya, I walk faster than Timmy. So, if for example, meron tayong dalawang velocities, meron tayong velocity na 10 kilometers per hour at meron tayong velocity 5 kilometers per hour. Which one is supposed to be faster? Alin po mas mabilis, yung 10 o yung 5? Okay, it's the 10. Okay, it's obvious the 10. But the next question is, why do we know that 10 is faster than 5? Bakit natin alam na 10 ay faster than 5? Okay, so my students would normally answer it's because 10 is a bigger number than 5. But hindi naman yun yung point, diba? One thing about physics is that if you have units, you are actually looking at a relationship between variables. Okay, so Sir Alfred answers that the amount of distance traveled over time. But actually, kung titingnan po natin, is that here, what we have is an expression that actually combines together the relationship between speed and distance for equal amounts of time. So what we know is that given 10 kph and 5 kph, for a time of 1 hour, let's write that down. For t is equal to 1 hour. What happened? Okay, so sorry. Mali yung eraser na napindot ko. So dito po tayo. Okay, so for t is equal to 1 hour, what we know is that for the first kind of speed, which we can represent as S1, for S1, what happens is that ang D1 actually natin dito is actually 10 kilometers. For the second kind of speed, which we will call S2, ang distance covered natin actually is 5 kilometers. So as you can see, what happens is for the same amount of time, what is happening is you are covering a bigger distance when you have a speed of 10 kph than if you are covering a distance of 5 kilometers. So therefore, from here, we can get the relationship that speed is actually proportional to distance if ang time natin ay constant. Okay, so therefore, we have the first relationship here where you have the speed as being proportional to distance if they are having the same time. Pero ang problema natin kay Timmy and Tim is that magkaiba pa rin, ano? So 30 minutes, tsaka 10 minutes to get to school. So we really cannot resolve their questions, we cannot resolve yet kung sino sa kanilang dalawa ang tama. Okay, so sabi ni Ma'am Cherilyn, further displacement from the origin. Okay, so ano naman yung katapat kapag baliktarin natin? So if, for example, what now happens is we still have 10 kph and 5 kph. If they are to both cover a distance of 10 kilometers, ang expectation natin is the time to be covered if you use S1, which is equal to 10 kph, and S2 is equal to 5 kph, the time needed to cover 10 kilometers for the first one is actually 1 hour. So sa isang oras, kuhang-kuha na ng 10 kph yung 10 kilometers na distansya. On the other hand, if ang speed naman ngayon ay yung sa S2, then we know that in order to cover the 5 kilometers, ang kailangan niya ay 2 hours. Okay, so from here, we come up with the idea that speed is inversely proportional to time if d is constant. So the same thing actually applies if it's velocity. So whether it's velocity or speed, ang ano lang naman kasi niyan is yung pagkakaiba ng ating pag-distinguish ng sa displacement and distance. But because that is already something that should have been discussed at the very beginning, we only look at it from the point of view ng relationship na meron tayo dito between either distance or displacement and speed or velocity as well as with time. So now you can see that we have two relationships here. The first one tells you something about speed is proportional to distance if the time is constant. And here you can see that speed is inversely proportional to time if d is constant. So what do we therefore say about kung if we try to already sum up everything that we have here? So if we try to come up with a statement that will sum up everything, we can actually sum up yung discussion nito natin dito with this phrase. An object is considered to be fast if it can cover a large distance for a short period of time. Okay, so in that case, what is happening is we can actually make this particular conclusion that in the case of an object to be considered to be faster or fast, it should cover the larger distance for a shorter period of time. So ngayon, balikan natin si Tim at si Timmy. If you go back to the story of Tim and Timmy, what you will please notice is that supposedly si Timmy mas malayo yung nilalakad niya kesa kay Tim. So that is why sabi niya 30 minutes ang kailangan kasi malayo yung bahay ko. And Tim also is saying na oo nga malayo yung bahay mo pero baka naman kasi mas mabilis lang ako sa'yo maglakad. So the only way we can resolve this particular situation is for us to actually know what is there. First and foremost, gaano ba talaga kalayo ang bahay ni Timmy at ni Tim galing sa school, and ano ba ang speed ng bawat isa? Because the only time we can determine that Timmy is right if we can prove that because his house is further, of course, he will require more time to do that. Pero there is also still the possibility na si Tim actually just simply walks faster than si Tim walks faster than Timmy. So in that case, ang resolution nito requires further information. But as I have said, ang whole point ng ating discussion na to is for us to understand that when we talk about the speed of an object, we always have to look at the number as well as the fact that this is a proportion. Kasi proportion naman talaga to, di ba? So manonotice nyo po na eto siya, kapag sinabi nating 10 kph, ano bang ibig sabihin ng 10 kph? That's 10 kilometers per hour. And because it is 10 kilometers per hour, so for every hour, 10 kilometers dapat ang makover niya. It is supposed to be a proportion. And because it is a proportion, we can actually relate that to these two different relationships. That the speed is proportional to the distance. So the longer distance that is covered for the same amount of time, the faster the object is, and it is inversely proportional to time. So the shorter amount of time needed to cover the same distance means that the object is faster is supposed to be something that should be emphasized when discussing about either speed or velocity. So of course, you can use the same argument for you to be able to discuss yung sa velocity naman. Papalitan nyo lang po yung terminology to displacement na hindi natin ginawa ngayon kasi nga if we follow strictly yung meaning ng sa displacement at mahirap po tayo na walang direction na pinag-uusapan, di ba? We have a very strict definition regarding tawag nito regarding displacement. So let's begin. Let's see. Are there any questions about the first one? Okay, so by the way po, ito pong slides na to, together with the annotations that I'm writing here can actually be captured and sent as a PDF file later. So you can have a copy again of my very beautiful handwriting after we finish with the session. Okay, so wag pong mahiya magtanong ha. Please just ask your questions in the chat so that we can resolve them as we go along. Okay, so next. Okay, now this time, instead of a story, we have a cartoon. This particular cartoon, you have Turvy. Turvy is a hybrid bat/girl, and Turvy is supposed to be looking at an acorn. And what Turvy is doing is actually, she is trying to race against the acorn as the acorn falls to the ground. Okay, so Turvy likes to challenge the 3 spine cones to a race to the ground. And here is maybe to her, it's a sibling rivalry. So, kumbaga, ang ginagawa ni Turvy, ginagawa niyang game yun na nakikipag-unahan siya sa acorn habang nahuhulog. Okay, so the question that we have here is, will Turvy win each time? Mananalo ba daw si Turvy sa bawat time that Turvy is trying to raise an acorn? Okay, what do you think? Yes or no lang po. Will Turvy win each time? What do you think? Okay, so okay, sir, I like the fact that you no. Okay, so let us see whether or not Turvy will win each time. So sabi ni Sir Jose, no daw. So with a question mark, so medyo duda din siya. Okay, so we've appreciated the cartoon. May I ask now is Jeffrey says yes. Okay, with the definite na na yes. So let's see what's going to happen kapag si Turvy na yung natin. So let's make this a little bit smaller muna so that we can move this a little bit for some discussion. Okay, so we know from the situation ni Turvy that supposedly ito po ay isang free fall situation. Di po ba? So free fall po ang nagaganap. Okay, so Ma'am Jinky says again, insufficient data. Okay, so let's see. So here we have bat/girl. Hindi kasi siya technically si bat-girl eh. So bat/girl and an acorn racing towards the ground. And what is supposed to happen is si Turvy wants to win each time. Okay, so ang question natin is, will Turvy win each time? So what we know is, let's start from the acorn because the acorn is actually easier to manage because the acorn cannot fly. It can only drop to the ground. So we know that the acorn in this case is actually following free fall. Okay, naka-free fall si acorn. And because naka-free fall si acorn, ang alam natin sa kanya is the motion is supposed to be accelerated. So, ang free fall is essentially accelerated motion. And we also know that supposedly, ang acceleration ng object na to is actually equivalent to g. And because it's always moving downwards, we use negative 9.8 meter per second squared. Okay? So in the case of the acorn, sa case po ng ating acorn, our acorn actually drops to the ground. Okay? So ang term na ginagamit natin ay drops to the ground. So you already know, if you've been teaching physics for a while, that if something is dropped to the ground, not thrown down, ang initial velocity niyan will always be equal to 0. Okay? So if this is the acorn, let's choose a different color. So let's say, for example, this is the acorn, and this is the instance na at t is equal to 0, then we know that the velocity of the acorn is supposed to be equal also to 0 because it's dropping. So after another second, after 1 second has elapsed, what should be the velocity of the acorn? Ano dapat ang velocity ng acorn at this time? Okay, so para po hindi tayo masyadong matagalan ng kakakompute ng 9.8 kasi nandiyan po yung favorite numbers natin na 9 and 8, we will approximate this at negative 10 meters per second squared muna ha, as an approximation. Okay, so what should be the velocity after 1 second? Without necessarily going through the formulas. So without necessarily going through the formulas, ang expectation natin is that supposedly ang acorn, ang velocity niya should be 10 meters per second. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so si Ma'am Cherilyn at si Sir John Christopher, thank you very much for your answer. And then after another second, what we expect is that at t is equal to 2 seconds, the velocity should be somewhere around, okay, very good, around 20 meters per second. So you can already detect the pattern that we have here. So ang expectation natin is after another second, after another second at t is equal to 3 seconds, ang expectation natin, ang velocity niya ay 30 meters per second. Okay. Thank you, Sir John. So nakikita na ni Sir John yung ating pattern. So in this case, what you can see is that actually ang ating data here that you will note actually increases by 10. So makikita niyo po, nag-i-increase yan by 10. From 0 to 10, the difference between the two velocities is 10. Between 20 and 10, the difference is actually 10. And between 20 and 30, the difference is still 10. Okay, so you will note that bakit ganito? Bakit pantay-pantay ang ating difference in the velocity? This is because we made the assumption that the acceleration of this particular object is negative 10 meters per second squared. Most people tend to forget that when we say acceleration is equal to negative 10 meters per second, what we actually mean by that is that that is actually negative 10 meters per second every second. So for each second difference, so bawat isang segundo na lapse of time, what's supposed to happen is that the velocity should change by 10. So therefore, kung halimbawa ang number na to ay hindi 10, if the number is going to be 4, and you start with velocity initially is equal to 0, after 1 second, the acceleration should be, the velocity should be 4 meters. After another second, it should be 8 meters per second. And after another second, it should be 12 meters per second kasi nag-change siya by 4. So here, because it is changing by 10 meters per second, we can already predict that it will be 10 meters per second after 1 second, and then 20 meters per second after another second, and then 30 meters per second after another second. Okay, you can of course verify this with your equations, but let's not do that yet. ang kailangan natin ay to compare muna is yung kay Turvy at yung ano. So, tinabi ko na muna si Turvy kasi kailangan natin yung space. So, ngayon, punta natin si Turvy. Sa case si Turvy, kasi may pakpak siya, so ibig sabihin, hindi siya drop, di ba? It means that Turvy is not something that is dropped. Actually, what is happening is Turvy will actually have a initial velocity that is not equal to 0. Okay? So, let's just assume na ang initial velocity ni Turvy is somewhere around, let's say, 2 meters per second. So using the same rule and using the same fact that our acceleration is actually equal to -10 meters per second, at t is equal to 1 second, ano ang expected velocity dapat natin ni Turvy? Okay. Thank you, Sir John. So, dapat ay sorry, hindi ko na linalagay yung negative ha, pasensya na. So, this should be -12, but 12 meters per second. And at t is equal to 2 seconds, ano dapat ang velocity? Okay, thank you, Ma'am Cherilyn. So, 22 meters per second. And at t is equal to 3 seconds. Therefore, we expect velocity should be 32. Okay, so in this case, what's going to happen? If you look at the acorn, so let's say for example that they drop to the ground after 3 seconds, so you will see that the velocity of the acorn is actually 30 meters per second, and the velocity ni Turvy is actually around 32 meters per second. So in this case, Turvy is faster. So because Turvy is faster, the question now is Turvy going to win the challenge because she is faster? Mananalo ba si Turvy? Lagi? In this case? Kung laging ganyan yung sitwasyon? Ibalik ko po yung figures. Okay, mas importante yung figures kaysa sa comic, no? Okay, eto po. So, question natin. Kung ganito po ang sitwasyon ng ating acorn at ni Turvy, si Turvy ba ay mananalo lagi? Ang ibig nating sabihin is, will Turvy reach the ground faster than the acorn? So, sabi ni Ma'am Cherilyn, yes. So, now we go back to the question, why? How do we know that Turvy is going to okay, so increasing speed every second, that's true, sir. In fact, meron na tayong proof dito na meters per second. So in that case, because mas mabilis si Turvy, ang expected natin, si Turvy mauuna siyang makakarating sa ground. So actually, ang babalikan natin yan is, it therefore means that, yes, Turvy is accelerating, but actually the acorn is also accelerating, di ba? Both of them are actually accelerating. So in this case, what's going to happen is, mauuna si Turvy. Ang dahilan nun is because mas mataas ang kanyang velocity. Yes, the initial velocity is not 0. And also, because Turvy is faster, Turvy can actually cover the distance at a shorter period of time. Kasi, kung babalikan po natin yung comic, makikita po niyo dito na Turvy and the acorn are essentially covering the same distance, di ba? Parehas na distance ang kino-cover nila. Simula dito sa taas hanggang dito sa ground. So the distance between this one is the same. So we know that distance in this case is constant. And because distance is constant, then therefore, what happens is shorter time. Yes, Ma'am Charlene, very good po. So shorter time covering the same distance because turvy is faster. Okay po. So, yun po yung pag-ano natin ng sa velocity and acceleration. We always look at it from the point of view that we are looking at relationships of numbers as well as quantities. So, yun po yung ano niyan. Okay, so therefore, this one will tell you a little bit something about what is the effect of an initial velocity doon sa motion ng object even if the object is already accelerated. So dalawang parehas ang acceleration nila, pero mas mabilis si turvy kasi si turvy ay merong initial velocity. Okay po. Okay, so let's continue. Tinitingnan ko rin po sa live kung merong question doon. Baka meron. Okay, so now let's look at this one. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's just do a concept check. Which of the following state? Okay. Sir Jeffrey. Ma'am, when we use the sign, dapat ba lahat ng components indicated din ng sign? Opo, sir, actually, later on, when we go through the projectile motion, kailangan po nating i-indicate na kung pababa, negative po ang quantities natin, kung pataas, positive po. We will do that later, sir. But you are right. Okay, so thank you for the question, Sir Jeffrey. Okay, so let's continue. So which of these statements describes acceleration? So first, you have the statement, it is a change in velocity. So this statement, is this correct or not? Gawin natin, numberan natin para mabilis tayo, no? Okay, sabi ni Sir John Christopher, correct daw. Second statement, it is the rate of change in velocity. Acceleration is the rate of change in velocity. Is this also correct or wrong? Okay, sir. So therefore, between the first two statements is actually the second one that is correct. Okay, so it is the rate of change in velocity. Ito kasi, it's just simply change in velocity. So that means that's only delta V. So hindi po siya appropriate kasi may kakulangan siya sa ano. But the second definition says it is a rate of change. So that will be delta V over delta T, which is the correct way to define it. Okay. The third one, it is how fast velocity changes. Correct din po ba to? Yes, it is also correct because it is essentially just the same statement. Simply using instead of the term rate, ang ginagamit niya is how fast. So the fourth one, it is the constant change in velocity. Sige, numberan ko na 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So number 4, constant. Lagi ba dapat na constant siya or pwede ba yan na ginagamit lang natin yan kapag uniformly accelerated? Kasi di ba pwede naman na hindi siya constant. Yes. So we therefore use the term constant change in velocity. Kulang pa nga to kasi dapat may rate of change pa rin. But also the term constant can only be applicable to uniformly accelerated. So there are instances na hindi siya uniformly accelerated. So therefore, medyo kulang din ang statement number 4. Okay? Number 5, it is the rate of change in the magnitude of velocity. Is this correct? Fifth statement po. Okay. Sabi ni Sir John Christopher, it is tama. Okay, so let's go to number 6. It is the rate of change in the direction of velocity. Tama po ba ang number 6? Okay. Sabi ni Sir Jeffrey, not. Sabi ni Sir John Kiso, correct pa rin. And then Sir Aljan says, incorrect. So actually, ang 5 and 6 has been combined together in a single statement for number 7. So number 7 says, it is the rate of change in the magnitude or direction of velocity. So is number 7 The appropriate one? Yes. So as you can see, kailangan po kasi na makombine natin yung dalawang statements na yon. And sometimes, acceleration can either be the change in the magnitude, meaning you have an increase in the or decrease in the magnitude of the velocity, or it can be a change in direction. So it's either the object was initially moving left and then it started moving right. So in that case, what happens is meron kang change of direction. So therefore, we have the statement or. So therefore, that makes number 8. Is this possible? The rate of change in the magnitude? In describing it, dapat po combine sa state basta may or. Ang ano po natin, sir, ay or. Kasi posible po kasi na change of magnitude lang. So an example ng change of magnitude ay, let's say for example, from 10 meters per second to 13 meters per second. So that's a change in magnitude. So yung change ng direction ng velocity is, if you will remember your circular motion, yung circular motion natin. Sa circular motion, di ba ang nangyayari ay constantly changing ang direction ng object mo, pero supposedly, ang magnitude niya remains the same. So, it can be, yes sir, tama ka po, centripetal. It can be a change in magnitude or a change in direction for you to be able to describe acceleration. Okay? So, number 8, as you can see, number 8 says na end direction of velocity, but we prefer number 7 because number 7 combines, is actually a better statement regarding it's the rate of change in the magnitude or direction of velocity. Kasi mas ano siya, mas flexible siya in comparison dito. Kasi pag sinabi mong end, dapat magpapalit yung magnitude, magpapalit pa yung direction at the same time. Okay? So we therefore have statement 2, statement 3, and statement 7 as our statements that essentially can describe acceleration in a very precise manner. Okay, so let's continue unless meron pa pong question. Sa Facebook Live po, you can also ask your questions. Okay, so hi Bernie, thank you for the comment. Okay, marami na po kayong nagsasagot dito. Okay, thank you very much for your answers also in Facebook Live. I'll try to check in every now and then.